They told me not to ask questions. They told me not to poke around in places that didn't concern me. But what if the very thing they were hiding was sitting in plain sight all along? In the middle of our neighborhood stood a house, boarded up, forgotten, and officially erased from every HOA record. But when I pushed back against their warnings and stepped inside, I discovered why they wanted it hidden. What I found would send shivers down my spine. And once it came to light, it would change the entire community forever. Did you dare to open the door to a house your HOA swore never existed? At first, life in the neighborhood seemed perfect. The kind of place where lawns were trimmed like green carpets, mailboxes gleamed with a fresh coat of paint, and neighbors waved politely but rarely lingered long enough for real conversation. It was orderly, predictable, and tightly controlled. For the family who had moved in only a year earlier, this was supposed to be their escape. They wanted quiet weekends, safety for their kids, and the kind of stability that came from living in a well-managed community. The HOA promised all of that, and on the surface they delivered. But something always felt off. On walks with their dog, the family noticed one house that didn't match the perfection surrounding it. The grass grew tall, vines snaked up the siding, and the windows were sealed tight with weathered boards. No one came and went. Children whispered about it on their way to school, daring each other to run up and touch the peeling front door before sprinting away. When they asked about it at the next HOA meeting, the room went quiet. The president cleared his throat, brushed the question aside, and moved on to the next agenda item. No explanation, no discussion, just silence. It was strange, yes, but in a neighborhood where rules dictated even the color of your blinds, the silence felt heavier, more intentional. And deep down, the family knew this house was the thread that, if pulled, would unravel everything the HOA had worked so hard to control.
The more they asked, the colder the responses became. Letters arrived in the mailbox, fines for yard infractions that didn't exist, warnings about unauthorized modifications they had never made. Each fine came with the same message: pay quietly or face escalation. But the timing was too perfect to ignore. Every new question about the abandoned house brought another punishment. Neighbors began avoiding them. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when they approached. Even friends who once invited them to backyard barbecues now crossed the street to avoid being seen together. Fear had seeped into the air like smoke. The family decided to dig deeper. They searched public records, but the property seemed to vanish into a bureaucratic black hole. No current owner listed, no sale history, nothing but decades-old deeds that went nowhere. It was as if the house didn't exist officially. Still, the HOA's obsession with silence made their curiosity burn harder. Why go to such lengths to hide one house? One night, returning from work, the father noticed a figure near the property. A man in a dark jacket was slipping through the gate, flashlight in hand. But when confronted, he bolted, vanishing into the night before word could be exchanged. The next morning, another fine appeared in the mailbox. This one claimed their trash can had been visible outside approved collection hours. The absurdity was clear, but so was the threat. The HOA was weaponizing anyone and anything to silence them. The family stood at a crossroads. Back down or push forward? They chose the latter. Late one evening, under cover of darkness, they cut through the padlock on the side gate of the abandoned house. The boards creaked, dust filled the air, and the smell of rot clung to the walls. Flashlights revealed peeling wallpaper, overturned furniture, and stacks of unopened HOA leathers, dozens of them, years' worth, stuffed into a corner like someone had abandoned their life overnight. And in that moment, it became clear. The HOA had been hiding something far bigger than a neglected house. But before they could process it all, a shadow appeared in the doorway. Someone had followed them inside.
The HOA president himself stood there, red-faced, fury in his eyes. He demanded they leave immediately, warning that they were trespassing, breaking community law, endangering themselves. But his outrage was too desperate, too rehearsed. When the family refused, when they told them they'd seen enough to involve the city, something inside him snapped. His threats turned into screaming. He called them liars, troublemakers, people who didn't belong. He swore he'd have their homes seized, their reputation destroyed, their lives ruined. But what he didn't know was that the family had recorded everything. The fines, the threats, the inspections, and now this confrontation. The video went viral within days. News outlets picked it up, calling it the HOA horror story. Reporters swarmed the neighborhood. Residents who'd once stayed silent found their courage, stepping forward with their own stories, harassment, intimidation, and years of unexplained HOA spending. The final blow came in court. A judge ordered a full audit of the HOA, uncovering years of mismanagement, secret funds, and illegal practices. The abandoned house, once dismissed as irrelevant, became the centerpiece of the case, a physical symbol of their corruption and secrecy. In the courtroom, when the ruling was read aloud, the president's face fell. He was barred from ever serving again. The HOA board was dissolved. Heavy fines were levied. And for the first time in years, the residents felt free. The climax wasn't just legal, it was emotional. The family who endured so much stood vindicated. Their defiance had turned the tide. The monster had been unmasked, its secrets dragged into the light for all to see. The silence that followed the HOA president's downfall was unlike anything the neighborhood had ever experienced. For years, fear and secrecy had been the background noise of daily life. Residents whispered about fines, avoided eye contact with board members, and carefully trimmed hedges or painted shutters in obsessive compliance. But after the hearing, when the judge ruled against the HOA, the community changed almost overnight. The abandoned house at the center of it all, once hidden, boarded up, and treated like a shameful secret, was finally opened. The locks were cut, the windows unsealed, and for the first time in decades, sunlight poured into its dusty halls. What neighbors saw shocked them. Mold, creeping up wallpaper, piles of rotting furniture, and stacks of HOA correspondence left unanswered, some still in envelopes dated years back. It was as if time had been frozen, the house standing as a monument to neglect and obsession. The family, who had endured months of intimidation, fines, and veiled threats, stood there among the crowd as city inspectors shook their heads in disbelief. The house wasn't just a health hazard, it was physical evidence of everything the HOA had tried so desperately to hide. And here was the irony. The very rules the HOA used to terrorize residents had left the board themselves vulnerable. By keeping the property hidden, refusing to disclose ownership, and silencing anyone who asked questions, the leadership had violated transparency laws and concealed community records. When that came to light, the ruling was swift. But the true impact wasn't just in legal victories. It was in the shift of power. For the first time, neighbors who once avoided each other now gathered in the street, talking openly, no longer afraid. They formed a committee, not of control, but of accountability. The family, once painted as troublemakers, found themselves approached with gratitude. Children rode bikes freely again, yards blossomed with individuality instead of rigid uniformity. And the abandoned house was eventually restored, not by the HOA, but by a collective of residents who wanted to turn a symbol of secrecy into one of rebirth. The scars remained, yes, but the lesson was clear. Power, when unchecked, festers, and silence only feeds it. The final town hall meeting brought everything full circle. Residents gathered in the newly restored house, its walls freshly painted, the air smelling of wood polish instead of mildew. The family spoke not of revenge, but of truth. This house was hidden from us for years, but maybe that's the real lesson. Secrets, when left in the dark, grow into monsters. What destroyed this community wasn't just neglect, it was silence. Never again should we let fear stop us from asking questions, from standing up when something feels wrong. The applause was thunderous. And from that moment, the abandoned house wasn't just bricks and wood anymore. It was a story, a warning, a reminder that communities must be built on trust, not fear. And maybe, as you watch this now, you should ask yourself, if there was an abandoned house on your street, one your HOA swore didn't exist, would you have the courage to open the door?